What's going on, everyone? Very excited today. Women's International Day was yesterday, and it's great timing for this video that will be coming out. We're going to talk about gender inequalities today, specifically in pharmacy informatics. And because I am not a female, I'm going to have three special guests come and talk about these topics. All right, we'll see you guys in a little bit.
So I'm Katy Shaver. I did my undergrad and pharmacy school at The Ohio State University, and currently I am a PGY2 Pharmacy Informatics resident.
And my name is Stacy Ellingson. I did my undergrad and my pharmacy school. I got a bachelor's at North Dakota State University back further than I really want to tell you, and most of my further education occurred on the job.
And I'm Corinne Jean Thomas, and I did my undergrad at Michigan State and my pharmacy school at University of Michigan.
What made you guys interested in pharmacy informatics?
So what made me interested in informatics, probably, I've told the story before, so I'll try to keep it a little shorter this time. I really loved computers as soon as we got our computer, our family computer at the time, and I just loved playing with it. I started doing web design, web programming, doing HTML coding by hand, and I just had so much fun with it. And then in undergrad, I started doing a lot more with Excel and data and analytics, working within microbiology and molecular genetics. So it was always just fascinating, the different and interesting things I could build and create, and how I could improve things. And so I always loved it, but then I always loved the medical field, and so I knew I was going to be a doctor since I was 6 or 5. And so once I realized I didn't want to be a doctor, I had to find something else. I ended up falling into pharmacy because I thought it was really interesting, and then I ended up doing my very last rotation of my P4 year with my elective in informatics, and I fell in love with it and completely changed the trajectory of my career.
Well, I have a much more untraditional route. I started out as a staff pharmacist at my institution that I am currently still working at. I've been there for 27, 28 years now. Most of my career, I can say that I worked in various places. Large institution that I was able to move through. There was a lot of opportunity for increasing my knowledge, a lot of opportunity for learning different things. And over the course of my career, I can't say that that as a child growing up that I knew anything about computers, because we didn't have PCs or Macs, and we certainly didn't have handheld devices. So most of that I've had to learn on the job, and most of the time it's just what I needed to learn at the time. Now, as I was raising my children, I became much more interested in the whole process and what it involved. And in particular, in the later part of my career, I started to become very interested in how I could make it better for a typical staff pharmacist. And when the opportunity was placed in front of me and arose, I grabbed at it. And I will say that I had to do a lot of the learning as a self-learning process. I became educated in informatics. I got a certification with HIMSS, CP HIMSS, and I reached out to anybody I possibly could to learn about it. And that's how it's been about 5 years now that I've been working in the informatics world.
So my path was different than both of yours. So I was an administrative intern all through pharmacy school, and kind of strayed away from that as I was going through my P4 year. Did a traditional clinical PGY1 residency, and then during that year I had the opportunity to help one of our sister hospitals come up live on Epic, and really liked that experience with the project management and teaching and training end users. So it kind of all came together, since I feel like I had a pretty varied perspective, and that's important when you're working in the medication use process. So that's how I like informatics.
So the next question is a pretty hot topic, and it spans multiple industries, and it's about salary, the salary gap for men versus women. So we have a report that came out in March 2016 from HIMSS that talks about this gap in health IT for women versus men, and they found that men make on average $126,000 a year versus women who make $101,000. So pretty substantial of a difference. And then it's even more large of a difference in executive positions, where women make only 63% of their men counterparts. So pretty significant. What are your thoughts on this?
I have a pretty strong opinion about that. First of all, I wasn't even aware that there was that big of a gap, other than maybe reading about it. I've heard about the gaps that are out there in the rest of the United States for all other kinds of jobs. But my own personal experience has not been that there's been a gap. For the most part, we're all paid very fairly at my institution and relatively similarly for the same job. Now, that being said, I don't really know what every other person makes, because it's kind of one of these things that's kind of frowned upon. People don't really talk about what they make. Yeah, it's blurred out. Nobody really talks about it. It's kind of one of those things that nobody really asks anyone else and nobody really talks about. And maybe that comes from being in the part of the country that we live in, that people just kind of feel that's more of a private thing. But obviously we do some of the same work. And as a woman, I feel sometimes there are certain things that I might even do better. There might be things I don't do better, but there may be things that I actually do better. So I would expect to be paid equally for what I do.
Right. It would balance out. You have your strengths, others are going to have their own strengths.
I mean, I would expect that maybe up until now that there might be more men in leadership positions, but I would think that if you work in the same position, that you should be paid
the
equally.
same amount.
I remember, and it was in a book that I had read. I'm horrible at remembering titles of books, but I remember reading about it. Was one of the things that they thought with the difference in executive positions between males and females was that men are more likely to ask for a raise. They're more likely to expect that they're going to get paid more, versus women are. I always hate bucketing people, but that women are less likely to just be aggressive and just ask and take that initiative. They're more content with feeling like they're being paid for the job that they're doing. And
you got a really good point there, because one of the things I heard about after I took the current job that I have is, there is room for negotiation. And it never occurred to me at the time when I accepted the job that I could negotiate my wage.
Yeah.
It never occurred to me, and maybe that is what you're speaking about.
I think that's kind of how I think always in general too, and so it's interesting because a lot of my male friends, they'll talk about, we're having our yearly review, we're going to negotiate for salary, we're going to negotiate for that raise, right? And I'm like, I guess I should probably ask for more than what they're going to just offer me. I probably should do that. But it really just doesn't, it's not there in the front of my brain thinking, I should be doing that every time whenever I have that opportunity, that I should move forward and lean forward and all of that and just try, because what's going to happen? I say no.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I've experienced the same thing talking to my male friends. It was kind of like, they're not going to just say, never mind. They'll just say, no, thank you, but continue to offer you the job. So
I guess I don't know. Maybe the question to the rest of you is where do you teach that then? How do you gain that skill? Because I felt, even though I knew I'm supposed to do this, I would say, okay, I'm going to do this when I go in my interview, and when I get that, I'm going to negotiate. But how do you really, gain that experience?
Yeah, I think that's something that's definitely not taught in pharmacy school at all.
I don't think it's taught anywhere. I think it's something that is probably maybe ingrained or learned socially.
I can't take a web class.
We should have one.
Ryan, what is your input?
Let me throw you guys another thing I found yesterday from HIMSS, and they actually have a report that found that with every child that a female has, their salary decreases by 4%, their lifetime earning potential. I thought that was very interesting. Well, granted, it makes sense, but just another reason why it could occur is what you're saying.
Well, and those things have occurred in my career, where I have felt treated differently because of the choices that I've made. Once I had 3 children, and I had them within 5 years of each other, I didn't feel that I could work full time for a period of time. My husband was a salesman, And I just felt like I needed to be the one to cut back.
So you had your kids when you were still clinical, right?
Yeah, well, yes, I was kind of a mix. At that time, we didn't have very specific clinical roles. When I came back from my third maternity leave, I was put into a much more clinical role in an ICU. And really because nobody else wanted the job at the time, not because I had the qualifications for it. I had to learn on the job. And over time, over the next 17, 18 years working in the ICU, I became more clinically oriented and established.
Is it 4% because for every child compared to men? Like, did they look at that?
Is it because of the time taken off, or do you?
I didn't dig into it.
They probably don't actually have.
Brian,
like,
why don't you have these answers?
me
Answer answers. Oh, by the way, I love your floppy disk earrings. They're really cool.
And there's
Oh,
a
take-
mouse pointer.
and it's a
Oh, you got a mouse little.
All right, moving on to the next question. We're going to talk about women in leadership roles, primarily in pharmacy or pharmacy informatics. But so quoting that same study from HIMSS in March 2016, there is certainly a gap in leadership roles as well. So two of the ones I'm going to talk about is like senior management. So for senior management, you see 10% of women in those roles compared to 19%. So that's almost double. And then men in executive management has 11.8% representation versus 3.6%, and that's for executive management. So both senior management and executive management, there's less representation. What are some of your thoughts on why that is, and how can we bridge that gap?
I'm just a resident. I'm not sure why yet.
Well, it's probably partially because it was right around the late 80s when most pharmacy schools finally crossed that bridge of 50% students were pharmacists, pharmacy students were women. So it was my class actually that went to 51 in my university. And so many of the management for many years were just being taken from the crop of male pharmacists that were the dominant, more experienced and
more people
and the dominant numbers. And I think it's just taken 25 years for that transition in some ways. It's definitely made a difference in our institution. We have, right now in informatics, we have all 5 of our leaders are women, which is quite impressive.
It was a double take when they first were.
Yeah, it was kind of a double take, wasn't it? When we looked at it, they're all women. But our top,
the top
next level,
executive level leaders for both pharmacy and pharmacy informatics here
is very dominantly men.
Yeah. And it could come back to, again, more willingness to negotiate or climb career ladders with men, or again with family, perhaps not taking time away from work. I don't know.
But it's very encouraging that these men that are at the top are hiring the women right below them.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I think that it's just a matter of time, and women are going to work their way into those positions as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's where it's, well, how do you fix it? Where's the solution? How is this going to change? Because 3% is such a small number. When you think about that, it's ridiculously small for that many. Only that few women are in that very high, that executive level. So
I think you have to flood the numbers with women, and then you have to prove your competence. And if you prove your competence and there's a flood of options and good quality candidates, they'll have to hire women eventually. I know it's not ever soon enough for most women, but it's so much better than it was when I started my career.
And it's odd because we've had conversations about things like that in the past, and it's like, thinking about it, no, my pharmacy school, we had more females than we had guys in my class. And so all my pharmacy experience since I started at school, it's always been seeing more women than men. Mm-hmm. So it was interesting thinking like the historical point of, oh wow, there was at a point, so all of those who are now 20 years ahead of me, that's when it changed versus this is just the everyday.
Mm-hmm. I would be interested to know what the differences are in pharmacy, because this is just health IT, the numbers that you're giving. So, pharmacy is definitely, I think, more women now than men, but probably not for all healthcare areas. So that could also be contributing to this. I don't know what the balance is in other areas.
And or whether or not in pharmacy leadership, I mean, it probably would have. Is the difference as dramatic, or
the opportunities? How many opportunities are there out there for your PGY1 residencies to really get a good taste or flavor of what pharmacy IT is all about, so that someone would actually become interested in it? And it hasn't been until the last few years we've even had a significant number of PGY2 residencies, so that our people, whether they're men or women, can come into the field and learn about it.
Yeah.
So this is an extremely young field right now, and it's growing dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
So there's two things. One, I don't know if you guys remember, but the reason why this idea came out was because we talked about our 5 managers.
Yeah.
That's how the idea came out. And the second thing is, last year a report came out from AJHP talking about women in pharmacy leadership. They didn't really have much statistics on that. So they quoted statistics from other industries, IT, engineering, medicine, but not pharmacy in specific. There's probably something out there, but nothing like published, you know. But that's a good question. I would hope there'd be more, given that there's so many females entering pharmacy now. So.
But I think that's something that, in like the STEM field in general, because when you were talking about these numbers and I was looking at it what about with computer science? It's the same. So it's not as drastic of 3%, but there are only less than 20% are females that are in leadership positions. And then when you look at big tech like Google and things like that, then it was less than 15. So there's always a gender gap for sure, but we're pharmacists. We like numbers, right? So I want data.
So moving on to the next question, we're going to talk about flexibility, just in general. You know, what is your impression about flexibility in terms of being in a pharmacy informatics position?
So I think that's one of the greatest things about our position with pharmacy informatics is that we do have a lot of flexibility. You're not chained down, always having to do rounds at a specific time in the morning. So then that then ends up driving your schedule for the whole entire day. So I need to get that in at this point so I can do pre-rounds, then I'm going to do rounds, then I'm going to go into clinic, or we have our office hours, so I'm going to have patients and I'm going to see them from 8 a.m. until 5, and then I'm going to have to do all my charts, and then I'm going to be here and do all of that work. We do have a little bit more flexibility. It's more, well, what meetings do I have? What schedule? Do I need to be on site? Do I need to go down to where we work here? We're located in an off-site informatics location. So do I have to go downtown to one of the hospitals, to a clinic, or to a different building? And it's a lot more dynamic. So I really like it. It's one of the big pros, I think, too. Pharmacy informatics, and then also I'm able to spend a little bit longer time when I'm at home for Christmas and things like that. So it's nice. I can work from home. I just need to have a Wi-Fi signal.
Yeah, that's what I did. I could spend extra time with my family over Christmas because working remotely is totally fine. I mean, most of our meetings even are all
global
crossings, or
it's all web conferencing.
Yeah, web conferencing. So you hardly even meet in a room anymore, but. Yeah, I think it's super flexible. Even like traveling, if you go on vacation and a flight is better on a Thursday night than it would be on a Friday, take the Thursday night and then work remote for 6 hours Friday. You're already there.
And as long as your employer allows that remote, right, which most do when you're in informatics, it's really nice.
Yeah.
I spent the majority of my career working holidays and weekends and evenings and missing my kids' events and having to swap schedules and all of that hassle. It's so nice to have a regular job. It almost felt like I worked less when I was working more hours when I joined the informatics group, because I had this flexibility to just log on at the times when it was more convenient for me. I was still able to go to my kids' events. I was still able to participate in family things on weekends. I could pick my holiday, most of my holidays were off, whereas I worked every third weekend for 25 years almost.
Wow.
Every third week, every other to every third. So there's a lot of weekends that I missed with my family. So informatics just gives us a much better opportunity for that.
Yeah, especially with holidays and things like that, or like having to determine like a vacation schedule, or am I going to be able to take my vacation? Who am I going to have to, like you said, juggling, and who am I going to have to switch with in order to get that? Or, oh, I'm not going to be able to go home for Christmas like I did. I think it was my PGY 1 year. I had the Christmas shift. So it's, well, we're going to have Christmas on Thanksgiving. So
Yeah.
I will say though that it's very busy when you have an implementation.
Oh yeah.
An implementation is another entirely different thing. And when you're in the middle of an implementation, you have to have the expectation that you're going to be putting in long hours,
Yep.
and you may miss a few things.
Yep.
But the pre-implementation and the post-implementation, I think, is there's a significant difference. So that is something to think about. You know, it's not 100% that it's better.
Right.
There can be times when you put in some really long weeks.
it's night and day. Then it's you're spending more time.
Yeah, really.
So our last question is tips and advice to women who are interested in joining the Pharmacy Informatics team. What would you say to them?
First of all, do not be afraid of dispensing. The vast majority of pharmacy schools nowadays kind of over-focus on the clinical side of things, which we all love clinical, we all love all the clinical stuff that we need, that's exciting and fun to learn. But ultimately, if you can't get the drug to the patient, all that clinical stuff doesn't really matter. And so much of what we do in pharmacy informatics involves interfaces with other different outside products, different types of dispensing tools, different kinds of pumps, and other types of compounding machines, automation, everything related to dispensing. And so when you're in your educational experiences, make sure you pay attention to those things, ask questions, get as much information as you can, learn about automatic dispensing devices and machines and things that do any kind of work for us, because that information will only benefit you when you would be involved in the informatics world.
Be curious about things, ask questions, try to really get understand things. And I think that's probably the biggest thing for informatics in general is the best informaticist is going to be somebody who's going to say, but why do we do that?
And don't be afraid to ask
How do
the
we
question,
do that?
right?
Like let's work through this. Let's walk through the process. And for any girls or for any women out there who are thinking about it, who maybe, well, IT, isn't that mainly men? Or, you know, well, it's like a guy field, like thinking about hackers or things like that. Like, no,
it's not like that.
No,
it's actually
at all?
it's much more task oriented.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a puzzle every day, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, that's why I really like informatics, because it's like coming in and solving a big puzzle every day, and figuring out how things work and then how to improve them. That's what I like about it. But I once read in a book that informatics is 90% people and 10% technology.
Yes.
And I think that's really true. And I think that's something that people don't realize when they think about informatics unless you're in it. Because I think some people think, oh, I like computers and I don't like to talk to people, so I'm going to go do informatics. But you would not be happy, I think, in most informatics roles, if that's the case. So
You really, as a pharmacy informaticist, you really are the in-between between the technology and the clinical role, and to understand both and to be able to bridge that gap of communication is really important.
Yeah.
And so those are some of them. And leadership, learning as much as you can about leadership, because you're going to have to project manage, you're going to have to do all kinds of things that are more leadership related functionalities. And if you don't have that experience, if you can't speak in front of people, if you can't run a meeting, you're going to have to do all those kind of things. So get as much experience doing those things as possible.
yeah. The other thing that I tell people, if you don't have access to an informatics rotation, in my opinion, the best things to go for are admin or med safety.
Yes, med safety, information.
Absolutely.
Things like
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because med safety is like the foundation of everything that we do in informatics. So it's super important.
Yeah, and I know some different schools, they may have a rotation or an elective, opportunities like that. Jump on it. I mean, if you have, most of the time I think a school is going to allow you to at least pick something. So look into informatics. It's a good experience. If not, even if you're, oh, I know 100% I really want to do informatics, but it's good for anybody who's going to be going into clinical, they're going to specialize, if they're going into operations, to understand how informatics and how IT works within the pharmacy department.
We're underneath every part of pharmacy.
And we are more glamorous than we appear to be on the surface.
That's true.
I love that. We're shiny. We're computers and stuff, right?
Yeah, there you go.
If you have questions for us, our director Brian will post our contact information below.
And if you like the content, like, comment, and subscribe.
Smash that like button. What does that mean again?
Until next time. If you like the content, like, comment, subscribe.
More enthusiasm.
Is that
More than
Please do that.
comment.